Welcome back to another video. I am Scott with Techno Eclipse. In today's video, I want to talk about planned obsolescence. Does Apple do it? Does Samsung do it? Is it a real thing? I'll give you my thoughts for why it could be a real thing. I'll give you my thoughts on why it couldn't be a real thing. And then I'll tell you what I think about planned obsolescence at the end of the video. So this is Scott with Techno Eclipse. If you like tech videos and you like this color shirt and this microphone pop filter, hit subscribe, tell your friends and family, and let them know you're subscribed to the coolest channel on YouTube. So let's get into the ways that planned obsolescence would actually be true. To start, I'm going to go over reasons why I think planned obsolescence might be a thing. To start, we'll just look at the easy one, how much money they make from planned obsolescence. If planned obsolescence is to be true, then the companies making the products that they plan to be obsolete in a few years would make them more money, because after 2 years, after a year, given the time frame, so for example, we'll be talking primarily about Apple iPhones and Samsung Galaxy series and even some of the other Android phones, but those are the two major players, so we're going to talk about them basically. It would be fruitful for Apple to have their older phones work less good, work not as good compared to their newer phones, and the main reason isn't because the newer phones have better functionality. It makes more sense to have their newer phones work because it's a newer phone and it's better for the consumer. No, because if their older phones are worse, it actually sort of promotes the people to buy their newer phones. So for example, Apple recently kind of got in trouble for this whole battery gate thing. And I'm so annoyed about the whole gate thing. You know, that little gate phrase is from Watergate, from when Nixon was bugging the Democrats. And do you know why we use the gate thing? It's not like they were at water and it was a gate. It was at Watergate. Why do we add gate to the end of everything? But I digress. So the battery gate was this thing that happened where this kid pretty much changed out his battery on his iPhone 6 or 6S, I believe, ran a GPU benchmark with the old battery and then with the new battery, and the performance on the multi-core score was almost like twice as good. So people got really upset because they're like, Apple is planning obsolescence in their smartphones. You can see here, because this phone is not as good, it's older, and then you have to replace the battery to make it work better. I'll explain why that's not totally true at the end, but that is a reason. And people, when they see their phone is slowing down, don't instantly think, maybe the power delivery isn't as good. That's something 1% maybe of the population might know, or 1% of 1%. But that's not something the majority of people are going to know. Like if my dad or mom or brother or sister, not girlfriend because I would tell her, but if one of those 4 people had something wrong with their phone, they would probably be like, or my phone's broken, I got to get a new one. When in reality, it's probably a simple fix. Maybe just replacing the battery, or maybe, replacing the logic board or something like that. That's a little bit more difficult, but you understand what I'm saying. So it would make sense for these companies to make these phones fail faster. That way they have to buy newer phones. And that's like the main argument against Apple and against Samsung is, well, they're making their phones obsolete. They're not, updating them. And then when they do update them, they nuke them and da-da-da-da-da. So why do I think planned obsolescence is not a thing? Well, I gave you my reason for why it could be a thing, and here are my reasons for why it isn't a thing. In terms of Apple, and even Android to a point, Apple has supported the 5S for all these years. It got iOS 12. They have been supporting that phone for 5 to 6 years by the end of the phone's lifespan. It probably won't be getting the newest update, but they have been supporting that phone for 5 to 6 years, and actually on iOS 12, they made the phone better. They made the software experience better, snappier, a little bit lighter so it could handle it. So that's an example right there of Apple saying planned obsolescence. That doesn't make any sense. We're supporting a phone that's 5 to 6 years old. Samsung and Google and most Android phone manufacturers don't support their phone for more than 2 releases of Android. But the difference between Android and iOS is the difficulty of getting it out. iOS, they have dates that they tell the carriers that they need to be ready by, like it's going to release on November 10th, this update 12.2 or whatever it is, and the carriers have to get ready. But with the Android phone manufacturers, Google releases it, and then they're pretty much like, well, if you want to, update it, you can. And these Android phone manufacturers will provide security patches and security updates for many years supporting their phones for longer. And on Android, you don't really need the latest and greatest software. You could run Android 6.0 and still have a really good experience. Well, not as good as iOS, but still really good. So that's one reason why I think planned obsolescence might not actually be a thing. Second one could go both ways, but it's primarily that software and more advanced software just demands a more powerful CPU. It doesn't mean that the CPU is bad, it just means that it doesn't fit that software's need at the time. So for example, the original Premiere Pro or Movie Maker that you were using in 2007, or I don't think it wasn't even called Premiere Pro back then, but from 2007, you can look at that and be like, yeah, that doesn't require as much CPU power, because when that was designed, the CPUs at the time that was released were only as powerful as, let's say, a 10,000 on Geekbench multi-core score. But now, in 2018, those demand a lot more power because we have Ryzen CPUs that are like $180, talking about the Ryzen 7 1700 and 1700X, which are just under that $200 price point, and those multi-core scores are upwards of almost 30,000. Obviously, people use more than just Ryzen-based CPUs, but for example, it would make more sense that Premiere Pro, or not Movie Maker, but maybe Final Cut Pro, would demand more of a computer because in the time, the computer can supply more power. So Premiere Pro would be silly to not take advantage of all that extra horsepower to make it an overall better experience for the user, and this can translate to phones. Apple wants to make the best user experience. So does Samsung, so does Google, so does LG, so does Huawei, so does OnePlus, so do all these companies. And sometimes that requires more CPU horsepower. So when they update their software, they're not really trying to nuke your phone. They're trying to give you the best experience possible, thus making it look like your CPU isn't as powerful, but it's just not as powerful compared to when it came out. Because every CPU Apple has ever released on one of their chips is the most powerful CPU that Apple can release at the time on their phones. Which means, why would they not take advantage of the most powerful CPU they've ever produced? When looking at like Geekbench scores, this is just a baseline, obviously. You can look at an older phone like the iPhone 6, and it gets like around a 3,000, 2,500, somewhere in that ballpark on the multi-core score. And you look at the multi-core performance from the iPhone XS Max or even the iPhone 8, and those are above 10,000. That's 5, 4, 3 times as powerful. Apple would be foolish to not make an operating system that requires more CPU power and uses that CPU for background tasks to just make the experience better. So it makes sense that Apple would try to promote these phones. And my final reason is that it doesn't make sense from a business standpoint. Why would Samsung and Apple knowingly make their phones bad so people upgrade? Because if that were to get out, people would stop trusting this company. When you buy a product that is as expensive as an iPhone or a Note, I mean, these are $1,000 investments. These aren't just $1,000 purchases. These aren't $100 purchases. This isn't going to Chipotle. This is an investment. You are trusting this company with your money, and you want the best bang for your buck, and you want to get the best experience out of that $1,000 investment. For example, when you buy a car, you don't want to buy a car brand new off the lot from Toyota that's going to break down in 4,000 miles, and then you find out a year or two later that, oh yeah, Toyota knew that was going to happen and they just did it anyways. You would never buy a Toyota ever again. Same thing with phones. If you were to buy a brand new phone and then it broke like 6 months later for no reason, or it started to slow down and lag for just no apparent reason, you would not want to buy another phone from that manufacturer again because it slowed down too fast. So building trust with the consumer is really, really important when you're selling a product that is as expensive as an iPhone. And even just in general, when you buy a product, you probably lean towards stuff that you know has worked in the past, you know will work, or you look it up on YouTube saying, what camera should I buy? You have $800 and they tell you that this is the best $800 camera. You trust that person, and then you look up the brand, and then you trust that brand. And that is exactly what all these companies are trying to do, such as Samsung or Apple. They want to build trust with their consumers because it's easier to sell to somebody who's already purchased your product and knows the quality and knows what they're going to get. They know how good it is. They know exactly what it means to buy this product. For example, when I worked at Golf Galaxy, we were told to try to upsell people. So they were buying like a new set of clubs. Go, hey, do you need gloves, tees, or new golf balls? So when you are selling to somebody, you want to sell to somebody who has already purchased from you. It's way easier to just sell to somebody who's already bought from you than to sell to somebody who hasn't bought from you, to get a new customer. Again, you can see this with the products that I own. I'm a bigger fan of Apple. I've used Samsung phones in the past. Those are the 2 Android phones that I have gotten because I knew of their quality. When I got the S7, I knew the quality. When I got the Note 8, I knew the quality because of the S7. So when I buy an Apple product, it's not because I'm a sheep, it's because I know what I'm going to get. I know it's going to be a little bit more expensive. I know it's going to work really well with all my other products that I own that have this little shiny Apple logo in the back of there. And I know that the quality is going to be really good. I know the operating system. I know everything. So what does that mean? Does that mean I believe in planned obsolescence? No. I think planned obsolescence, it doesn't make any sense. You can't build a company by having planned obsolescence. It really doesn't make sense. Things deteriorate over time. That's a fact. For example, lithium batteries deteriorate over time. That's just a fact. That's not Apple, making their products not work after a certain amount of time. That's Apple dealing with lithium batteries. Lithium batteries, even in Tesla cars, have this same problem where they actually will deteriorate over time. They will have to be replaced eventually. So planned obsolescence to me doesn't make any sense. I would like to hear the other side of it though. I only had the one argument 'cause to me it doesn't make a ton of sense, but I'm totally curious to see what you guys say about planned obsolescence. I know sometimes Apple seems really frustrating to keep everything locked in, but I don't think that means it's planned obsolescence. I just think that that's just how they do it, and a lot of companies do the same thing. I don't know. Maybe they don't make repairs easy, but I think you sacrifice the ease of repair for thin, small, light, powerful, portable, in my opinion. Although on desktops, it doesn't make a ton of sense why it's so hard to repair. So those are my thoughts. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comment section down below. I'm Scott with Techno Eclipse. If you liked the video, hit that subscribe button and make sure you send a Snapchat out to all your Twitter followers so they can double tap that on Instagram and share it with their friends on Facebook. This is Scott with Techno Eclipse. Thanks for watching. Peace out.